Paul Newman was famous for those piercing blue eyes, that effortless charm, and a career that defined Hollywood greatness. But what most people never realized is that Paul Newman didn't see beauty the way Hollywood told him to. He wasn't impressed by perfection, lighting, or glamour. He looked deeper at intelligence, confidence, and presence. After decades beside the most beautiful women in cinema history, he formed a private list that challenged everything Hollywood believed about beauty. And once you hear it, you'll never see classic Hollywood the same way again. Unlike Hollywood lists built on glamour and hype, Paul Newman's perspective was deeply personal. He didn't just see faces, he saw souls. The women who stood out to him weren't simply attractive. They carried something deeper that stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. These are the 8 women Paul Newman believed represented the highest form of beauty. Not just how they looked, but who they were. Every reflection Paul Newman ever shared about beauty began with the same name, Joanne Woodward. In an industry where marriages often collapsed under fame and temptation, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward remained together for 50 years. Friends said his admiration for her was never casual. It was profound. He famously explained his fidelity with the line, "Why go out for a hamburger when you have steak at home?" But those closest to him knew that statement barely touched the truth. Joanne Woodward's beauty was never loud or demanding. Paul Newman described it as something that revealed itself over time. The first time you met her, she was attractive. The 10th time, you realized you were in the presence of someone extraordinary. She combined intelligence, wit, artistic integrity, and emotional depth in a way that only deepened with age. She was an Academy Award winner before Paul Newman, a serious actress who never relied on appearance alone. Even through hardship, including his struggles with alcohol and the devastating loss of their son, his admiration for her never faded. Friends recalled seeing Paul Newman watching Joanne Woodward across a room in their later years, with pure wonder. To him, she represented beauty that evolved rather than faded. When Paul Newman worked with Grace Kelly on The Left-Handed Gun in 1958, he encountered a very different kind of beauty. Grace Kelly was already on the brink of leaving Hollywood forever. Having married Prince Rainier III of Monaco, she was completing her final film before becoming Princess of Monaco. Yet even before royalty, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. Paul Newman once described her as silence in a loud room. On chaotic film sets filled with noise and urgency, Grace Kelly moved with calm precision, drawing attention without effort. What impressed Paul Newman most was her consistency. She didn't transform under studio lights. She looked the same walking through the commissary as she did on camera. Elegant, composed, regal. He once said Grace Kelly was the only actress who seemed more natural as a princess than a movie star. Her beauty wasn't constructed by Hollywood. It was inherent, rooted in character and self-possession. To Paul Newman, her elegance came from alignment between who she was and how she appeared to the world. If Grace Kelly represented composed elegance, Elizabeth Taylor embodied raw intensity. Paul Newman admired not only her legendary violet eyes, but the emotional force she carried wherever she went. Elizabeth Taylor didn't enter rooms, she detonated them. Unlike stars who cultivated distance, she demanded closeness. She wanted to be felt. Her beauty came with courage, chaos, and honesty. Paul Newman respected the way Elizabeth Taylor lived openly. Multiple marriages, health struggles, public scrutiny, and personal battles were never hidden. Where others concealed vulnerability, she embraced it. She aged publicly, without retreating from the spotlight, and seemed to accept each stage of life without fear. Paul Newman once remarked that she was the only star he knew who appeared to enjoy growing older. To him, Elizabeth Taylor represented beauty strengthened by bravery, a woman unafraid to live fully, and visibly working alongside Sophia Loren in Lady Ellen 1967. Paul Newman encountered confidence in its purest form. Sophia Loren never tried to fit Hollywood's mold. She kept her accent, her curves, her identity. She was unapologetically Italian and completely comfortable in her own skin. Paul Newman once said that when Sophia Loren walked into a room, every man became irrelevant. Not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't need approval. Her beauty was inseparable from her intelligence, humor, and emotional depth. Unlike actresses who guarded perfection, Sophia Loren laughed openly, cried freely, and allowed herself to appear imperfect if the role required it. Paul Newman admired that she was an actress first and a beauty second. To him, she embodied a European understanding of beauty, one that embraced maturity, strength, and authenticity. Although Paul Newman never worked directly with Brigitte Bardot, he was deeply struck by her cultural impact. Brigitte Bardot represented something entirely new. She wasn't polished or carefully managed. She moved as if the rules simply didn't apply to her. Where earlier stars embodied structured glamour, Brigitte Bardot introduced a natural, undone presence that changed cinema forever. Paul Newman admired how uninterested Brigitte Bardot seemed in approval. She didn't perform beauty for others. She lived inside her own experience. That freedom made her hypnotic. Her influence extended far beyond film, reshaping fashion, attitudes, and perceptions of female autonomy. To Paul Newman, Brigitte Bardot represented beauty as rebellion, effortless, disruptive, and revolutionary. In a Hollywood dominated by curves and overt sensuality, Audrey Hepburn stood apart. Slim, graceful, and quietly radiant, she wasn't expected to succeed by traditional standards. Yet she did. Paul Newman was drawn to her gentleness. Where other stars demanded attention, Audrey Hepburn invited it. Her presence made people lean forward rather than step back. Paul Newman once said her eyes looked like they had seen another world. That depth came from hardship, compassion, and remarkable humility. Audrey Hepburn never embraced sex symbol status. She focused on humanity, especially later through her work with UNICEF. As she aged, she didn't fight time. She grew into herself. To Paul Newman, she represented beauty as character made visible. Lauren Bacall impressed Paul Newman from the very beginning. Even at 19, she projected absolute confidence. Standing opposite Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not, she appeared not as decoration, but as an equal. Paul Newman once described her as the most dangerous woman in a cocktail dress. He meant it as the highest compliment. Lauren Bacall's beauty didn't rely on flirtation or softness. It came from intelligence, wit, and self-possession. Her famous lowered chin and upward gaze conveyed authority. To Paul Newman, she represented beauty as strength, a woman who never asked permission to take up space. By the early 1970s, definitions of beauty were shifting, and Ali MacGrath embodied that change. Her appeal wasn't constructed. It felt discovered, fresh, vulnerable, and emotionally transparent. Paul Newman admired how openly she expressed feeling. Unlike actresses who protected themselves, Ali MacGrath allowed audiences in completely. He once said she looked like heartbreak before it happened. Her eyes carried emotion without defense. To Paul Newman, Ali MacGrath represented a new era, beauty rooted in honesty rather than perfection. Looking at these 8 women, Paul Newman reminds us that beauty was never about perfection. It was about character, courage, and authenticity. He saw what lasts, not what fades. If this story changed how you see classic Hollywood, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again as we uncover the timeless truths behind legendary lives.